Come with us on a musical journey through some of the most magnificent places on Earth. Great towns and cities of Europe, steeped in history and beauty, and resounding with the stories and music of the world's great composers. Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, Grieg, Vivaldi, Tchaikovsky. Just some of the greats in our classical destinations. Hello, I'm Simon Callow. Welcome to another journey to the most spectacular destinations in Europe as we investigate the lives of the great classical composers. These are the sights that they saw, the surroundings they lived in, the scenes that influenced the wonderful music they produced. Over to Matt and Nikki.
Welcome to Classical Destinations. I'm Matt Wills.
And I'm Nikki Vasilakis.
And today we're at the Ålands Fjord, a branch of the Sogna Fjord in Norway. The Sogna is the longest and deepest fjord in the world.
And from where Matt and I are standing, it's over 200 kilometres up this fjord to the ocean. And today we are going to see some of the most magnificent scenery on this planet.
And we'll be listening to some of the music of Edvard Grieg, so much of it written in honour of his beloved Norway.
Norway, land of the midnight sun, fjords and Vikings, is one of the largest countries in Europe by land area, but has a population of just 4.5 million. Our journey will take us from Bergen on the west coast, through the fjord country and on to Oslo with a brief excursion to Copenhagen in Denmark. Norway is a kingdom, actually a constitutional monarchy, which can be traced back as far as 890 AD. Bergen is probably just as old.
Even though Oslo became the capital some 700 years ago, Bergen continued to grow. It was a significant trading centre, especially during the years of the Hanseatic League.
The League was a type of trading company of mainly German merchants that continued until the 17th century. They dealt mainly in fish and grain. Because of these important trade links, Bergen has always been a cosmopolitan place.
When Alexander Gregg first moved here from Scotland in 1770, fishing soon became the family's business, trading lobster and dried fish across the North Sea. Alexander later changed his name to Grieg, and so our story begins.
Bergen is now Norway's second biggest city, and it was a bustling town in 1843 when the man regarded as the country's greatest composer was born here on the 15th of June, Edvard Grieg.
Being born into a fairly well-to-do family in Norway in the 19th century meant that being educated in the ways of music was a given. Also, Grieg's mother Gesine was the most accomplished pianist in town and taught her son well.
Grieg's mother was also active in the local music society, as had been his grandparents. The society, or Harmonien, is one of the world's oldest orchestras, founded in 1765. Today, that music society goes by the name of the Bergen Philharmonic Orchestra and calls this magnificent hall its home, the Grieg Hall or Grieghallen. Five kilometers south of Bergen, one arrives at the Edvard Grieg Museum at Trollhaugen. The property was built by Edvard and his wife Nina, and they spent the last 22 years of their lives there together. This is the composer's hut, where many a long hour was spent in solitude. Still on Grieg's chair at his piano is his book of Beethoven piano sonatas, which enabled him to reach the keys. Edvard was a small man.
Ole Bull was one of the most influential violinists of his time. He was born here in Bergen in 1810 and travelled throughout Europe and North America giving concerts.
One day, sometime in 1858, Ole Bull came to visit the Griegs on their estate. Edvard remembered it as the single most important day of his life. He had to play for Ole, and after he played several compositions, Bull became very serious and went and spoke to the 15-year-old boy's parents. Then he came back to Edvard and said, "You are going to Leipzig to become an artist."
Trollhaugen has been carefully looked after in honor of Grieg's memory. It's now open to the public for tours and as a concert venue. Concerts are held here in the Memorial Concert Hall, which was built overlooking his composer's hut, right at the water's edge.
Edvard was quite a character. As a child, where the family lived was a long way from the school he attended, and the journey was often long and wet. But Edvard noticed that those who turned up to school wet were sent home to change. Now, as he lived so far away, this effectively meant a day off. He exploited this by standing under a drain pipe, so he could turn up to class soaking wet. He came unstuck one day, however, when he turned up to class soaked to the bone on a day that had barely been raining at all.
Grieg was a country boy at heart. His relocation to Germany to study at the academy in Leipzig in 1858 threw him into the deep end of fast-paced urban society.
Sometime after he finished his studies in Leipzig, he moved to Copenhagen, where he became entranced with his cousin Nina Hagerup.
The pair had grown up together here in Bergen, but Nina had moved to Copenhagen with her family. It was her beautiful singing voice that first enchanted him. They were engaged in the spring of 1865. As a gift, Grieg presented Nina with 4 songs he had set to texts by their friend Hans Christian Andersen, calling them Melodies of the Heart. Soon after, Grieg began to work on his piano concerto in A minor, one of the most popular concertos in classical music. Grieg's piano concerto in A minor is a young man's piece. He was 25 when he wrote it. He was in love, he was ambitious, he wanted to make an impact. You can feel it right away, right from the start. He doesn't want the pianist to sit around waiting for the orchestra to shake hands with the audience. It's just a roll of the timpani and wham! No messing about. But for all the drama of this opening and many other pieces, there is an essential geniality about Grieg. Romantic his music may be, but there's no sense in it of inner conflict or anger. What would his Viking forebears have made of it? Of course, Grieg wasn't completely Norwegian. His family name comes from his great-grandfather, a Scot, who emigrated in the middle of the 18th century. I think we're entitled to regard Grieg as more than a little British. Grieg loved Norway and was passionate that he should represent his country in his music. He wanted to present its grandeur and beauty to the world. But in Grieg, grandeur in music doesn't mean epic length. He said artists like Bach and Beethoven erected churches and temples on the heights. I want only to build dwellings for men in which they might feel happy and at home. One of the best ways to see Norway is by train. You can travel from Oslo to Bergen direct or with scenic side trips through the fjords, villages and countryside that so inspired Grieg. Matt and Nikki took this option of stopping along the way over several days to explore the region of Norway on what is known as Norway in a nutshell. The Hotel Ullensvang on the Surfjorden is not far from Bergen, via train to Voss and then ferry. It was built in 1846 and has been run by the Utne family for 4 generations. The region around the hotel and the village of Loftus provides 1/5 of Norway's fruit production. It's also known for its local wine. Grieg found this area especially inspiring when he first came here in 1877. He used to sit on this rock for inspiration at the foot of the hills. He also loved to walk the many hills surrounding the village. He decided to compose here, and so had a small hut built for the purpose. While Grieg was here, he made many friends, not the least of whom were the owners of the hotel, Hans and Britta Utne, who became lifetime companions of the Griegs. Today, their descendant, Edm Harris Utne, has some wonderful recollections of Grieg.
He was 34, my great-grandmother was 30, and she had a fantastic influence on Edvard Grieg. She helped him when he had problems, and here he composed some of his most fantastic compositions. That's why we also have the composer's hat in the garden. That was originally built behind the hotel, beside a small river. And he was sitting there playing on this spinet. You know, when this small little man from Bergen, he was 154 centimeters high, was sitting there hours after hour, clunking on the piano. The local people thought, what kind of person is this? And again he was disturbed. And once he just clapped again the piano, the spinet, and went down to my great-grandmother and asked, Brita, I need your help. They don't give me any silence, so what I'm going to do? You have to move the hut. But no one in the village came to help him. So he came to my great-grandmother and said, what's going on? They won't help me. I offer them money and everything should be okay. Edvard, you have to make beer and aquavit. They want to do it for you, but you have to give them something to drink and something to eat. I make the cakes, you make get some farmers to make the beer and the aquavit. There was not only the nature that inspired him, but the culture and the Hardanger dialect. He was sitting in a corner, listened to them. Sometimes one of the farmers took up the fiddle, playing for him. This was such an inspiration for him.
Fjords are part of the scenery in Norway, especially here on the west coast. During the last ice age, glaciers cut these monstrous valleys deep in the Earth's crust. When the ice was gone, what remained is one of the most awe-inspiring coastlines in the world. The Sonja Fjord is the longest in the world, and it is also the deepest, in places up to 1,300 meters, over 4,200 feet deep. Here in the Fredheim Hotel in Flum, overlooking the fjord, it's hard to believe that huge tour liners can cruise right up here, some 200 kilometers from the ocean. Flum is a very special destination, a hidden treasure, and this hotel is the perfect place to stay in the heart of this friendly village. The Fredheim was first built in 1870 and still preserves its traditional heritage, even though it has been refurbished and enlarged a number of times since. Surrounded by the steep mountainsides, roaring waterfalls and deep valleys around Flum, the Fredheim is something of a paradise. With vistas like these, it is easy to see why the Norwegian fjords and surrounding countryside were such an inspiration to Edvard Grieg.
The Flum Railway is a one-of-a-kind experience. It's a branch line from the main Bergen to Oslo track, and believe me, it's worth every second of the 60 minutes it takes from here to where it joins the main track at Myrdal.
The railway is one of the steepest in the world, rising from sea level at its beginning to an elevation of 866 meters in the mountains at Myrdal, just 20 kilometers away. Tunnels weave through the mountains, at one point making a full 180-degree turn. Even though the train crosses the river 3 times, there are no bridges. Instead, the river is fed through the mountains by a system of tunnels under the railway. It's a must-see when in Norway. This train journey shows you some of Norway's wildest and most magnificent scenery. Rivers that cut through deep ravines, waterfalls cascading down the sides of snow-capped mountains. mountain farms clinging to steep slopes. If you want to escape into the wilds of nature, there's probably no better or more breathtaking place on earth to do it. From Myrdal, we then rejoin the main line from Bergen to Oslo. The country is no less spectacular and the trip into Oslo breathtaking. Ironically, time is often the enemy of travel. But in order to make the most of this visually stunning country, you must forsake air for overland travel. How else can you possibly hope to take in the splendors a country like this has to offer? Finally, we arrive in Oslo, which is the capital of Norway. In Grieg's time, it was known as Christiania.
I'm in Karl Johans Gate. It's the main pedestrian boulevard in Oslo. And like Bergen, Oslo is a very old city. It was founded in the year 1048 at the head of the Oslo Fjorden. It's full of museums, galleries, parks. It even has an old royal palace and a castle built in the 1300s to guard the entrance to the harbour. Everything about the city is built for people, and virtually every attraction can be reached on foot.
It's no wonder then that Edvard and Nina Grieg moved here in 1866. They wanted to build a home for Norway's music in the heart of Norway's capital. But there was someone very influential in inspiring Grieg to this position, who, though he was Norwegian, first met Grieg a few hundred kilometers south of here in Copenhagen. For most people, Copenhagen means two things: the Little Mermaid and the Tivoli Gardens. This was before the advent of a certain Australian-born princess, of course.
Recently, Denmark celebrated the 200th anniversary of Hans Christian Andersen's birthday. But fairy tales aren't just in the past in Denmark. In 2004, a girl from the small island state of Tasmania in Australia became Crown Princess Mary of Denmark.
The gardens first opened in 1843 to give the people of this crowded city some recreational space. It was quite likely here that Grieg met fellow Norwegian composer Rikard Nordraak. Nordraak's enthusiastic nationalism soon took hold of Grieg. Even though he was the one with the training from the conservatory in Leipzig, he looked upon Nordraak as his idol. He later paid tribute to his friend, saying that he opened my eyes to what is important in music beyond music. Grieg's time in Copenhagen was generally very happy. It was the home of his friend Hans Christian Andersen, and also where he proposed to his first cousin Nina and married her, a not unusual pairing at the time.
In Copenhagen, Edvard and Nina were madly in love. But in spite of that, Nina's mother was far from thrilled. At one point, she was quoted saying, "He has nothing, he can't do anything, and he writes music no one's interested in."
Grieg never intended to write picture postcard music. In fact, at one stage he said, "The serenity of nature is too cold for me, and that mountains have nothing more to express." Maybe that's why instead of writing huge, long works that matched the scale of his surroundings, he usually composed miniatures, songs, short piano pieces. The composer Debussy rather unkindly called them bonbons wrapped in snow, which I presume, coming from a Frenchman who enjoyed his bonbons, is an insult, though it always sounded rather delicious to me. And yet, once you see where Grieg lived, you understand that the feel of landscape is actually intrinsic to his music. It seeped deep into his fibre, whatever he was writing about. Even when it's exotic, it's full of Norway. Hearing it, you begin to imagine forests full of trolls and goblins, fjords and lakes, cool, misty dawns. Think of the famous Morning Mood from his Peer Gynt music. It's got that Nordic freshness stamped all over it. You can almost taste the clean air coming off the glacier, and yet it's supposed to describe the Arabian desert. The atmosphere heats up much more later on in Peer Gynt with Anitra's dance, an expression of the typically Scandinavian longing for heat in the south. You get the picture. Seductive hip movements by Arab maiden, flashing eyes, undoubtedly a tantalizing glimpse of navel. I say this only because the orchestral strings are accompanied by a triangle, which outside of military marches is always good for a suggestion of the exotic, particularly if you live near a glacier. Which brings us back to Norway. The fight to establish a truly Norwegian style of music was waged against the music establishment here in Christiania. Edvard and Nina's time here was hard, both musically and financially. He taught piano and conducted to earn a meager living. His good friend Rikard Nordrag died of tuberculosis in 1866 at the age of 24, and this had a profound effect on Grieg. But the year 1868 was different. It was the year that Grieg's daughter Alexandra was born, and it was also the year Edvard created in Copenhagen the now legendary piano concerto in A minor.
Good fortune wasn't theirs for long. Barely 6 weeks after the premiere of Edvard's piano concerto, while visiting Bergen, their daughter Alexandra died of meningitis.
In 1870, on a minuscule stipend from the Norwegian government, Grieg travelled to Rome, and while he was there he met with Franz Liszt. Liszt played the piano concerto by sight. He was greatly impressed by the piano concerto, and because he was the grand old man of music at the time, his approval really marked the turning point in Grieg's musical fortunes.
While his fame grew, sadly Grieg's personal life did not travel so well. His parents died in 1875, which left Edvard and Nina without a home to return to in Bergen, and within a few years, Edvard left his wife. His friend Franz Beyer came alongside Edvard, who by this time was struggling with depression, and managed to convince him to reconcile with Nina and put down some roots. In 1885, they reunited and moved into their new home at Trollhaugen. In his lifetime, Grieg was faithful to the desire of his heart to present his country through the sounds of the folk songs and legends, which had never been attempted before. It was so successful that in late 19th century France they spoke of 2 schools of music, the Russian school and the Norwegian school. He became friends with notable composers, Tchaikovsky, Brahms, Liszt, Delius, Granger, and he influenced others, Bartók, Ravel, Debussy. In the end, his constant traveling and workaholism got the better of him. Combined with a lung condition he had struggled with since he was a boy, it led to his collapse in Bergen while preparing for a trip to the music festival in Leeds in England in September 1907. Edvard Grieg died on the 4th of September in a Bergen hospital from chronic exhaustion. Bergen bade farewell to him. The city came to a stop with respect for this great Norwegian.
His choice of a final resting place for himself and Nina is here, overlooking the lake at Trollhaugen. Strangely enough, thanks to Grieg's music, I felt like I knew Norway even before I got here.
He really had an amazing gift at translating the love of his country into something that could reach people's souls.
Next time, we're up the road and around the corner in Helsinki.
The capital of Finland and home of John Sibelius.
So it's goodbye from all of us. See you next week here in Helsinki.